The main issues really is that Africa is not manufacturing the levels as it should be. If you look at the exports, I think relative to the other continents, we're very low. Also, if you look at the trade in between our own African countries, it's not at the level it was. I think one of the issues that was highlighted is naturally the issue of skills levels, the issue of productivity itself, is that what do we do about it? The issue of foreign direct investment, to say how do we ensure that the levels of direct investments are increased? And the issue of infrastructure, because that also has got a direct bearing in terms of how do we encourage manufacturing. Yes.
Yeah. Now, in terms of all those issues that you mentioned, Geoffrey, these are issues that have been on the boards of many governments for so many years. Let's begin perhaps by looking at the biggest, which is the lack of skills in Africa to try and be able to produce the goods that are needed by the world. How quickly do you think, and also do you get a sense that there is the political will and ability to be able to upskill workers so we are able to produce these goods?
From our observation, also from the investments that we've had, I think there is the will. And the thing is with skills is that it takes time, because we have to also look at the education system.
Yeah.
I think there was also an example to say some of our universities, are they talking in terms of what they're offering? Is it related to what business wants outside there? So to me, it talks to ensuring that there is partnership between government and also with business itself. So we want all parts to really talk to each other. But in terms of the willingness, I think that is there, because we do realize that we have the resources as a continent. Okay, we have the market as well as the continent, and we're not trading. So yeah.
You raise an important point around long-term planning, and one of the issues that has been raised around the African continent is the fact that we do not seem to have, the capacity to plan long-term. Someone told me the other day that China had been developing its Africa policy. In fact, this policy that we're seeing now, the fruits we're seeing now, was developed 30 years ago. Do we have that capacity in Africa? And secondly, do we also have that willingness and that ability to know that this is what we need to do? We should not be thinking about the next election. We should be thinking 10, 20 years out now.
I think there's recognition in the continent that we have to start thinking long term. If you look in South Africa in particular, if you look at the industrial policy action plan that the Department of Trade and Industry has been looking at, also the new growth path, I think it's science for us to say that there is a need for us to think beyond the next election. Also, we probably the last continent really to take advantage of this. I think as China, we've seen the fruits of that. I think that gives us comfort, at least where we are, to say that there is willingness. Whether we have the ability as a continent as a whole, I think it depends. Also, the other thing is what makes Africa different is that we've got about 54 countries, whereas China is just about one single country.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk about South Africa, and let's talk about some of the issues that we've seen. Government attitude was identified in the session that you attended as one of the impediments to getting foreign direct investment here. I mean, we've got current examples. We've got the Walmart deal that's stalling in the works. We also had issues with the MTN Bharti deal taking off, and we've had other numerous examples. Are government's attitudes changing in terms of getting foreign investors to come in without attaching strings?
Well, I think if you look at the companies that you're referring to, those are some of the key companies that are important, that are playing a strategic role in the continent.
Yeah.
So naturally then, as economies are developing, governments tend to be worried to say now, if these companies are taken over by foreigners, will they still continue to help develop the continent? I think it's that anxiety that we see. But as far as attracting foreign direct investment, I think the continent is aware that that's an imperative that we used to have. So I wouldn't read too much into those decisions that they make, that it is a sign that they're not necessarily embracing FDIs.
Sure. Beneficiation was identified as one of the key issues that ought to be addressed, but at the same time, we heard earlier that the lack of skills is also one impediment. So how do we beneficiate? How do we add value when at the same time we lack the skills? Are we not contradicting ourselves here?
I don't think we are. I think what we can do is, because we have the resources here, what we can do is we can encourage technology to come and invest here. I think what we're doing is, as IDC, for an example, I mean, on the area of the green energy, we're saying we know that we don't want to reinvent the wheel. That's what we don't want to do.
Sure.
I mean, we're saying now, let's encourage the people in the other countries, those of the technology, to invest in South Africa, so that in that process we can learn from them, and also then they can be able to upskill our people.
So let me ask you a difficult question. What should government then be doing to, number one, enable us to get the skills that we need, secondly, to get the technology that will help us utilize those skills, and thirdly, provide the environment that's required to attract all those things here?
Well, it comes to policies. Firstly, we need to invest in education. That's the one, but that's a long-term thing.
Easier said than done.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's easier said than that. I think there's a commitment. If you look in terms of the spend, particularly in South Africa, I mean, the government is spending a lot on education. But the other thing that we need to do is there needs to be consistency in policy. There needs to be alignment in policies. I mean, to the government, and I think from where we're sitting, particularly now we're reporting to the Economic Development Minister, I think there is willingness. We're seeing that government is talking, is honestly looking at the policies to say, are our policies not contradicting? Which, because if they contradict, they create that impression then of making it difficult for people to invest.
Yeah. So Geoffrey, we don't want to invent the wheel here. So we can look at perhaps outside and see where there are working examples that we could take in and simply copy and do them right.
Yes.
Where can we find successful examples of where manufacturing has worked in terms of a policy that government actively encourages? We have examples from Brazil. We've seen what has happened in China. Are there any good examples that we can incorporate and take?
Well, 3 weeks ago I went to South Korea. 50 years ago, South Korea was equivalent to a number of African countries. If we see they've invested in education, and if you look at their policies of encouraging business to work, I think we can be able to copy from. They don't have resources, but they have one of the biggest steel companies.